Greetings, I'm Tom Ely, serving as the Bishop in the Episcopal Church in Vermont. And I'm here to introduce the year-long process that we're calling Becoming More Missional. It's a discernment process helping us take a look at the future of the Episcopal Church in Vermont and what we need to have in place in order to become a more missional Episcopal Church. By missional, I mean our efforts to engage God's mission by being out and about in our neighborhoods, in our communities, serving and finding God at work in those neighborhoods and in those communities. You might think of missional as being more of a sent community rather than a gathered community, although our gathered communities help support and strengthen us for that work of being missional, of being out and about and in service of God's mission. As many of you have heard me say before, the church doesn't have a mission. God has a mission, and God has a church to engage that mission. And that mission is a mission of reconciliation, of healing, of restoration, of trying to be at one with God and each other, and to make that mission a reality in our communities, in our neighborhoods. So how do we equip ourselves as an Episcopal Church in Vermont for that future? We'll need to look at the way we organize ourselves for our mission, the way we fund our mission, and the resources, including human resources that we need to have in place in order to accomplish that mission. So as part of this process, we're engaging in a year-long effort to look at ourselves closely, to explore the opportunities we have before us, and to draw some conclusions and make some recommendations that will set us on the right track, or on a good track, we hope, for the future. And as part of that process, I've engaged 3 consultants to help us in that work. Christine Graham, who some of you know, who served as our consultant 3 years ago when we did a feasibility study toward a capital campaign. Del Glover, who is going to be working with us in the long haul around looking at those issues of funding our mission and our structures and support and the kind of systems we need to have in place. And Craig Smith, who's serving as the development minister for Rock Point, helping us look at the future of Rock Point and how that mission and ministry takes shape in the future. So my first conversation is with Christine Graham, who is a local and statewide consultant in these matters, and we've asked Christine to do some work looking back and looking forward with us, and so it's my pleasure to welcome you, Christine, and thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Perhaps you could tell folks a little bit about the work that we've asked you to do.
Mm-hmm. Good. 3 years ago, I did a feasibility study and interviewed about 30 individuals in the diocese and also 3 groups of clergy. And we were exploring the possibility of a major campaign, but we were also looking at questions about communication and change and people's relationships within the diocese. And at that time we decided not to go ahead with a capital campaign, but to work on some of the other issues that were really important to people. And this time we're going back and looking at some of those questions, although not the major gift campaign question, and really looking at what kind of change people have been seeing in the diocese, how they're feeling about their own church and their church's relationship to the diocese, and communication and other issues that came up in the last series of interviews. So this time I talked with 17 individuals on the phone, not in person this time, and we're also in the process now, not finished, but in the process of conducting a SurveyMonkey online survey where we'll give 2,000 people in the diocese the opportunity to ask the same kind of questions that I asked people on the telephone. So at this point I've completed the phone interviews, and I can talk about what I've seen there, what I've heard, and I've looked at the responses of the first 120 or so SurveyMonkeys, and I guess, one quick reflection is that a lot of the online survey is coming out to reinforce some of the messages that I heard in the telephone interviews.
So what are you beginning to discover in terms of trends or the way people are thinking about where we are right now as the Episcopal Church in Vermont?
Well, I guess I have to always remind myself when I'm looking at these trends that I'm not asking people about a specific multi-million-dollar campaign. And so that took a little bit of the terror out of the conversations. But with that in mind, I'd also say that I'm finding, in general, a happier population. It's hard to use that word, but I'd say people are more positive. There's a more optimistic feel. And I think some of the trends that I saw before are much more distinct this time than they were before. I found in almost every topic that I asked people about, which included communication, change, relationship to their local parishes, people were kind of divided in half. And one half had a somewhat positive and maybe more positive than last time attitude. And the other half was divided between people who were unhappy, disoriented, or just felt out of touch. So it wasn't really 50-50, it was more like 50, 25, 25. And some of the things that I saw, some of the trends that I saw were that, not surprisingly, the people who are feeling better about communication and change are also people who are feeling more optimistic about their own local churches. And definitely, I found the same message before, which is the local church is the closest to each individual. That's where they define their membership, and the diocese is something beyond that. And so if their church is doing well, and they're gaining membership, and they're in a good place with clergy and not with interims, then they tend to be more able to look beyond themselves at the diocese and how the diocese is communicating with them. And when there's trouble at home or they're in a challenging position, it's harder for them to look outside, and they look inward and worry about their local church.
So one of the pieces that we've been trying to work at with some diligence is around that whole notion of local and more than local, and trying to help congregations see themselves as the Episcopal Church in Vermont, and the local expression of that there isn't some they and we that exist. We are the Episcopal Church in Vermont, and each local community is an expression of what it means to be the Episcopal Church in Vermont. In fact, I would say each person in their own life and in their living is the Episcopal Church in Vermont right then and there where they are. And so I'm wondering if you're picking up any sense of a growing appreciation of that thinking, rather than we're our church and they are the diocese.
Well, this won't be any surprise to you, but what I found over and over again is that there is no single way of looking at the Episcopal Church in Vermont, and there's no single definition of a local parish or the way that people are going to be worshiping or reaching out in their own communities. And so, I think one of the wonderful things about the church is that it has so many different types of people with different attitudes. I encountered people who wanted everything to stay just as it was. They like the liturgy. They don't want services at different times on Sunday mornings. They don't want children in Sunday morning service. And I met other people who want all of those things to change, and the church is big enough to encompass all of those people. But, so it would be, I think, a mistake to try to make it all work the same way for everybody. I think people are attracted to the church because of the tolerance of differences. So, but I did find differences like that, and some of them were as simple as saying, we want more and more information on the web, and other people saying, that's really cutting people out because some people aren't comfortable with the web. And some people are looking for a much more evangelical church, and some people say, evangelism is not part of the Episcopal Church. So, to a certain extent, I think each local parish must be defining its own personality, and people orient to the church they want to go to.
Right.
And they look at the local church first. So that makes your job so much harder.
Well, in one sense it does, but in another sense, as long as they're identifying that their local expression is the Episcopal Church in all its different ways in which it's given expression in Vermont, then I'm fine.
Yeah.
It's when they don't see that there's that connection, that they are the Episcopal Church in that place,
Right.
then that becomes a challenge that I experience. So I'm also wondering, are you finding any sense in which this notion of being more missional, being more of a sent community rather than only a gathered community that's waiting for people to come to us, that the kind of changes that we're seeing in culture and in the way people relate to institutions and so forth, is any of that beginning to take shape and life in the conversations that you're, and the survey information that you're getting back?
Well, that kind of thing came up a lot, and I think that churches that seem to be growing and at the risk of, kind of putting them in a box, more optimistic about the future are the ones that are more welcoming, but not just welcoming, like if you come to church, we'll say hello to you, but getting out into the community and doing more activity and establishing activities that work well for the community, not always focusing just on the church, but going out. I think those are the churches that are having the most success in growing membership and a general healthy environment, getting more members, which is something that's really on people's minds. Sure. So yes, I think that getting out is an important thing. It reminds me of one of the things that an interviewee said to me that I think is the most telling quote in all of my interviews, and that was that he said, it's not that we want the diocese to drive our work, we want them to support our work. So they want the work to grow out of the local church and have you, as the diocese, supporting them. They want you to come and visit them, but they don't want you to tell them what to do when you're there, right? And having...
that's the connection to the sense that we're part of something larger than ourselves, but we give it expression in our local context.
But it's so much easier for them to welcome the diocese into their activities when they feel like things are going well.
Sure.
So obviously, if every church could be growing in membership and financial health and have a full-time, long-term, beloved clergy, then things would be fine.
Well, I don't know about that, but as long as congregations are engaging in God's mission, they're and deepening their own sense of spiritual well-being and stewardship of their time and their gifts, and growing in that and deepening in that spiritual way, I think they become more attractive communities for people who see that expression at work in the world, and that then does in fact draw people more deeply into our congregation. So,
well, and we also have to remember that Vermont is an aging population, and it's easy for as the congregation grows older, it's easier for them to feel, we don't have children in our community, we're not getting new members. But if they can break out of that thinking and realize there are some children in the community and there are some young professionals there, and begin to be a little more flexible about the way they offer opportunities for those people to be part of the church, I think then the church begins to grow with its own momentum. And that seemed to be a really important issue, to have some variety of schedules and activities and just an openness to people in the community who are not the traditional members of the church.
Well, Christine, thank you for doing this work. I know that there's more to do, and
Mhm.
we're looking forward to the way in which you dig into these survey monkeys and invite people to actually fill out the survey monkey. We've sent this to over 2,000 people whose email addresses we have in our e-newsletter, and we'll be posting it on the website and other ways. So you've got some reading ahead of you,
Right.
and we look forward to the fullness of your report.
Great.
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Mhm.
Thank you for inviting me to do this.
You're welcome.